Hey, I'm Alex. I'm not the one to make a big deal out of things, but this situation with my parents has been spiraling out of control, and I can't keep quiet about it anymore. My parents, John and Linda, are the kind of people who think they can talk their way out of anything, that if they say it enough times, people will just give in. I've always been the responsible child in the family, the one they relied on when things got tough, but they didn't always see it that way. You see, growing up, I watched them make one bad decision after another. They couldn't hold onto money to save their lives, overspending on luxuries they didn't need, never budgeting properly, always living beyond their means. Every time they'd come to me with their hands out, asking for help, I'd lend them money or help with their bills, thinking that eventually they'd get their act together. But they didn't. They just kept digging themselves deeper. Now, I'm 30, I have my own place, and I've worked hard to build something for myself. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. A little two-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, just enough space for me to feel comfortable. I've been living here for a few years now, and it's the first time in my life that I've felt like I've finally made it. But of course, my parents didn't see it that way. It all started a few months ago when they showed up on my doorstep, unannounced. I wasn't expecting them. I had just gotten back from a long day at work, tired as hell, and when I opened the door, there they were, standing in front of me with those sheepish, apologetic smiles they always put on when they wanted something. "Hey, Alex," my dad said, his voice a little more hesitant than usual. "We need to talk." "Yeah?" I asked, trying to mask the exhaustion in my voice. I didn't have time for another one of their help us out requests, but I could tell this was different. The look on their faces was serious. "Can we come in?" "We need to discuss something important," my mom added, a little too eagerly. I stepped aside, letting them into the living room, already bracing myself for whatever they had planned. I couldn't say no. I was always the one they turned to when things fell apart. But this time, something in my gut told me it wasn't going to be a simple request. We sat down, and the conversation started innocently enough. They tried to ease into it, talking about how hard things had been for them lately. It wasn't the first time they'd complained about financial struggles, but this time, it seemed different. "We've been going through a rough patch," my dad began. "You know how it is. The economy's been tough, and we made some bad decisions, but we're trying to fix it." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I didn't want to sound too cynical, but I'd heard this all before. There was always an excuse, always something that had caused their problems. Then, they dropped the bombshell. "We've been looking at our options, and we were hoping you could help us out." My mom looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that always made me feel guilty. "Alex, we're not asking for money this time. We need a place to stay." I blinked, caught off guard. "What? A place to stay? What do you mean?" My dad chimed in, his voice getting a little more desperate. "Our finances are completely shot, Alex. We can't keep up with the bills anymore, and we don't have anywhere else to go. We were thinking, maybe we could move in with you, just for a little while until we get back on our feet." I froze. My heart sank. They were asking me, no, demanding me to let them move into my home? I was speechless for a second. I could feel the weight of their words pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a temporary favor. No, they were planning to stay indefinitely. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I don't know, Mom, Dad. I don't think that's a good idea. I have my own space, and I've worked really hard to make this my home. I don't think I can just take you both in. You've been here before, and it's always been temporary. But this time," my mom's face shifted instantly from desperate to defensive. "What are you saying, Alex? You're a child. We raised you, gave you everything we had, and now that we need help, you can't even offer us a roof over our heads." I could feel the guilt trip coming, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. "It's not like that. It's just, you owe us, Alex," she snapped, cutting me off. "All those years we spent raising you, sacrificing for you, and now you can't even do this one thing for us?" I was taken aback by her tone. This wasn't the mother who used to tell me I could always count on her. This was something else. She wasn't asking for help, she was demanding it, as if I was obligated. My dad jumped in then, his voice more forceful. "This is what family does, Alex. You help out when it counts. You can't just leave us out in the cold. You have no idea how hard things are right now." I was getting angry now. "I understand you're struggling, but that doesn't mean I'm required to put my life on hold for you. I'm not your safety net." Their faces darkened, the smiles from earlier vanishing. "Well, if you're not willing to help us," my dad said, his tone shifting, "I guess we'll have to figure out something else." There was a pause as I stared at them, realizing that this wasn't just about moving in anymore. They were about to pull out all the stops to make me feel guilty enough to cave in. I'm not saying no, but you're asking for a lot here, I replied, trying to stay calm, but inside I was already feeling the tension build. We're your parents, Alex, my mom said, standing up. You owe us for everything we've done for you. All we're asking for is a place to stay while we get back on our feet. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, my patience slipping away. This wasn't just a simple request anymore. It was a full-on demand, and my parents were acting like I had no right to say no. It was like they thought I owed them everything just because they raised me. And that's where they were wrong. I'm not going to let you just move in here like it's nothing, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've worked hard for this place, and it's mine. I'm not in a position to take on both of you. My dad shook his head, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. You really don't get it, do you? This isn't just about you anymore. It's about family. You're turning your back on us when we need you the most. How could you live with yourself knowing we're struggling, and you have the means to help? My mom joined in, her voice dripping with fake sadness. I'm so disappointed in you, Alex. We've always supported you, and now when it's our turn, you can't even give us a place to stay? I guess you don't care about us the way we cared about you. She wiped away an exaggerated tear, making sure I saw it. The guilt tripping was thick, but it wasn't working. I'd had enough. This was the same act I'd seen 100 times before, and I wasn't buying it anymore. You've made terrible financial decisions, and now it's my responsibility to fix it? I said, my voice sharp. I can't help you just because you spent all your money on stupid things. I stood up, feeling the weight of the conversation finally settling on me. Look, I'm sorry things are tough, but you're not coming here. You need to figure this out on your own. I'm not your fallback. There was a long silence. My parents exchanged a glance, and I could tell that their plan to emotionally manipulate me was starting to unravel. But instead of backing down, they doubled down. My dad let out a long, frustrated sigh. I can't believe you're making this so difficult. You don't understand what it's like to be in our shoes. He stood up and paced a little, rubbing his forehead. You're making us out to be the villains here, but all we're doing is asking for help. What kind of child refuses to help their parents in need? I felt the anger bubbling up again. You're not helpless. You're just irresponsible. And I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving you a free ride. At that point, I was done. I'd had enough of their manipulation, their guilt trips, their sense of entitlement. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. My parents didn't take rejection well. The next morning, I woke up to a surprise. As I was making my coffee in the kitchen, I heard a knock at the door. It was way too early for anyone to be visiting, especially with the drama from the night before still fresh in my mind. I figured it was probably my parents again, coming to beg, but I wasn't ready to deal with them yet. I opened the door, and sure enough, there they were, both standing on my front porch with stern faces. We need to talk, my dad said, without even so much as a greeting. Not now. I don't want to do this again, I replied, ready to shut the door. But before I could, my mom stepped forward, blocking the entrance. You're not getting away with this, Alex, she said, her voice cold and firm. We're not leaving until you do the right thing. I could feel my stomach drop. I'd been expecting some kind of escalation, but this was beyond what I thought they'd do. They were literally trying to force their way into my house. What are you talking about? I said, confused but increasingly alarmed. We've thought about it, and we're not leaving until you let us move in, my dad said, his tone final. You can't just push us away like this. We're your parents. You owe us. You have to help us. Dad, get out of the way, I said, trying to keep my cool. This is my home, and I've told you, But they didn't move. My mom stepped forward, her eyes narrowed in frustration. You don't understand. We have nowhere else to go. We can't keep living like this. If you don't help us, then you're no better than the people who've abandoned us. You owe us this, Alex. Don't make us beg. It was becoming clear they weren't leaving anytime soon. I took a step back, suddenly feeling cornered. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a request anymore. It was a demand, and they weren't going to take no for an answer. Stop. I'm telling you, leave. Now, I said, my voice shaking with anger. But they stood there, unmoving. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about control. And they weren't going to stop until they had their way. I could feel my blood boiling. I wasn't going to back down. They couldn't just barge in and take over my life like this. This was no longer a simple family disagreement. This was an invasion of my space, my life, and my peace of mind. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, but my patience was wearing thinner by the second. I'm not doing this anymore, I said, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside me. I've asked you nicely. I've tried to reason with you, but now you're forcing this on me. And I'm done. I'm calling the cops. Both of them froze. For a moment, there was silence. My dad looked at me, almost as if I had slapped him. He blinked a few times, his face turning red with a mix of frustration and disbelief. You're calling the cops, he said, his voice rising. You're going to call the police on your own parents? My mom stepped forward, her expression hardening. This is how you repay us? After everything we've done for you? You're going to call the cops because we need help. Her voice was thick with outrage, but there was also a hint of fear. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew I wasn't bluffing. I'm calling the cops, I repeated firmly. I wasn't giving in, no matter how much they tried to manipulate me. They had already crossed a line by refusing to respect my boundaries, and I wasn't going to let them do it any further. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but before I could unlock it, my mom grabbed my arm. Her grip was tight, and I could feel the anger in her touch. You're making a huge mistake, Alex, she spat. You think you're better than us? You think you can just shut us out? You owe us. We did everything for you when you were little. How dare you turn your back on us like this? Her words hit me like a slap in the face. It was the same tired, guilt-tripping speech they'd given me time and time again, but now it felt more suffocating than ever. They had no right to manipulate me like this. I had worked hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let them ruin that for me. I shoved her hand off my arm. No, you're the ones making a mistake. You think you can come in here, take over my house, and manipulate me into giving you a place to stay just because you feel entitled to it? No. My dad clenched his fists, his face turning redder with each word I said. If you do this, you'll regret it, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You're destroying this family. You're going to be the one who's alone when we're gone. I felt a chill run down my spine, but I didn't flinch. I was done listening to threats. Goodbye, Dad, I said, and I quickly pulled my phone out, dialing the non-emergency line for the police. I could hear my parents arguing in the background as I waited for the line to connect. My dad was shouting now, demanding I open the door. You can't do this. You'll be sorry, Alex. We're your parents. But I didn't open the door. I didn't let their words affect me. I just focused on the phone call, waiting for the dispatcher to answer. 911. What's your emergency? I took a deep breath, trying to stay as calm as possible. Hi, I need to report a situation at my house. My parents are here, and they're trying to force their way into my home. They're making threats and refusing to leave. I've asked them to leave multiple times, and now they're being aggressive. The dispatcher's voice was professional and calm. Okay, sir, I understand. We'll send someone to your location. Stay on the line, and do not open the door unless you're certain it's law enforcement. I thanked the dispatcher, hanging up just as I heard my dad pounding on the door. His voice was muffled, but I could hear the fury in his words. You're going to regret this, Alex. You've just destroyed everything. But I was done. I wasn't going to give in to their manipulation anymore. I backed away from the door and took a few steps into the living room, my mind racing. I couldn't believe this was happening. I thought I was done with all the drama, but now it seemed like it was escalating faster than I could keep up with. A few minutes later, I heard sirens outside. My stomach twisted in knots, but I stayed put, waiting for the cops to arrive. When they finally pulled up, I felt a mix of relief and dread. This wasn't how I'd wanted things to go, but my parents weren't leaving me with any other choice. I opened the door just enough to let the officers inside. Please, take care of this, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and anger. The officers stepped in, immediately sizing up the situation. My parents were standing there, arms crossed, looking more defiant than ever. You need to leave, one of the officers said firmly, his tone no nonsense. We've been called here for a disturbance. You're not allowed to force your way into this home. My dad opened his mouth to argue, but the officer cut him off. I suggest you leave now, or you'll be arrested for trespassing. The silence in the room was deafening. My mom looked at my dad, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But it was short-lived. They weren't done yet. The officers stood firm, and after a long, tense stare-off, my parents seemed to realize that their manipulation tactics weren't going to work this time. They stood there for a moment, glaring at me, trying to figure out their next move. It was clear to me that they were frustrated, but also not ready to completely give up. I could hear my mom mumbling something under her breath as she backed away from the door. This isn't over, she muttered. You'll regret this, Alex. You'll see. She and my dad exchanged a few heated words as they turned to leave, their heads hanging in defeat. The officers gave them a final warning to stay off the property, and with that, they turned and left. For a moment, I thought maybe that was it, that the tension was finally over. But I should have known better. It wasn't long before I started seeing posts on social media. My phone buzzed repeatedly, each notification more explosive than the last. First, there was a post from my mom. Her profile picture was of our whole family when we were still close. She had a way of using old photos to tug at heartstrings. So disappointed in my son today. I've given him everything, and this is how he repays me? I'm just a mother who's always been there for him. Is this the kind of child he's going to be? A selfish one? I don't know how he can sleep at night knowing he's throwing his own parents out on the street. The post had barely been up for a few minutes before the comments started rolling in. My mom's friends, a lot of them from her church group, chimed in with their sympathy. Such a shame, Alex. You were raised better than this, one comment read. Another one said, "You're in my thoughts, Karen. A mother deserves better than this." Then, my dad posted something too. His tone was much more direct. I raised that kid. I put a roof over his head, fed him, worked day and night to give him everything he has. And this is how he treats me? He'll come crawling back when he realizes what he's done. But I'm not sure I'll be here when he does. I felt the sting of his words, but it was nothing compared to the anger that followed. My phone started lighting up with messages. My siblings were texting me, asking what the hell was going on. My sister, Mia, was the first to reach out. "Alex, is everything okay?" she asked. "What's with all the posts from mom and dad? I've never seen them this upset." I ran my hands through my hair, trying to think of how to explain without sounding defensive. "Mia, they're lying. They're trying to make me look like the bad guy because I won't let them move into my house. They've done this before, manipulating me, using guilt to get what they want. I've had enough." She responded almost immediately, "But don't you think you should be helping them? You know, they did do a lot for you when you were younger. I get that they're asking a lot, but they're your parents." I stared at the message, my mind racing. I had already tried explaining to her, but I could tell it wasn't sinking in. I needed to talk to her face to face, but my parents had made their move online, spreading their narrative across every platform they could. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my aunt. She was one of the more reasonable people in the family. "Alex, I don't want to take sides, but I'm seeing these posts from your parents. It's hard to ignore. You've always been so independent, but don't you think it's a little harsh to throw them out like that? Are you sure there's no way you can work something out?" I let out a frustrated sigh. This was the last thing I needed right now. My parents had turned to social media to get the family involved, to pit them against me. They were making me look like the villain to everyone who would listen. I sat back down on the couch, rubbing my temples. I had to do something. I couldn't just let them spin this narrative without giving my side of the story. But what could I do? If I responded directly, I would just be playing into their game. If I stayed silent, the narrative would grow, and I'd be left trying to clean up the mess later. I stared at my phone, deciding I'd play it their way. I'd let them keep posting their angry rants online for now. But I knew this wasn't going to end until I made sure my side was heard too. The phone rang again, this time with a call from Mia. Her voice was tight when I picked up. "Alex, I don't know what's going on, but this is starting to look bad. People are starting to side with them. They're telling everyone you're being cruel. Even Grandma sent me a message saying you're not showing respect for them." I held my breath for a moment, trying to steady my voice. "I am showing respect, but I've had enough, Mia. This isn't about respect. This is about them manipulating me for years. They've crossed a line, and I'm not backing down." She hesitated, clearly torn. "I'm not sure what to believe anymore, Alex. Maybe you should just let them stay for a little while, until things calm down. It doesn't have to be forever, right?" I could feel my patience wearing thin. "Mia, listen. If I give in now, it will never stop. You know how they are. This is about control, not family. I'm not giving them that power anymore." She didn't respond immediately, and I knew the conversation wasn't over. But in that moment, I felt a surge of clarity. I couldn't let my parents' social media posts determine my life. I would take control of my own narrative, one way or another. The notifications kept flooding in as I scrolled through my phone, but I knew that now wasn't the time to reply. I would make my stand, but on my terms. And soon, my parents would see that they couldn't manipulate me anymore. As the night wore on, I continued to watch as my parents flooded social media with their posts, trying to paint me as the villain. They posted pictures of themselves looking miserable, making passive-aggressive comments about how their son has abandoned them, trying to gather sympathy from anyone who would listen. I had had enough. I'd given them more than enough chances over the years to show that they could respect my boundaries, and they had continuously trampled over them. I wasn't going to let this cycle continue. Not now. Not ever. The next day, I sat down and composed my response. I didn't care if it was going to upset some people. It was time to set the record straight. I took a deep breath and started typing. Let's set the record straight. Yes, I asked my parents not to move in. Why? Because they've repeatedly taken advantage of my kindness, made poor financial decisions, and always expected me to bail them out. I've given them my time, my money, and my patience for years. But the line was crossed when they tried to manipulate me into taking them in again, without ever changing their behavior. The truth is, it's not about helping them. It's about control. I've been working hard to build my own life, and I'm not going to let them undo everything just because they feel entitled to my success. This is not about disrespect, but about boundaries. I have a right to say no, and I'm not apologizing for it. To anyone who feels differently, maybe it's time you asked yourself why you're supporting this kind of behavior. I hesitated for a moment, but then hit post. Within minutes, comments started to roll in. Some of my family members, the ones who didn't know the full story, began posting their support for my parents. My aunt, the one who had asked about things earlier, even left a comment asking why I couldn't just let things go for a while. But I noticed the more honest, straightforward comments started to outweigh the manipulative ones. Then, I saw something I wasn't expecting. Mia commented. It was short, but it meant everything to me. I'm sorry, Alex. I get it now. I'll always have your back. You're doing the right thing. It hit me like a wave. Finally, someone understood. The posts from my parents came to an abrupt halt after that. For a while, it felt like they'd retreated into their own little world of bitterness. I didn't care. I had done what I had to do, and now the ball was in their court. They could keep playing their manipulative games, but I wasn't going to be a pawn in them anymore. A week later, I got a phone call from my mom. Her voice was quieter than usual, but the edge was still there. Alex, you don't know how much you've hurt me. I thought you'd always be there for me, and now you've turned your back on me. I paused for a moment. I had no desire to get dragged back into her guilt trips, so I said simply, "No, Mom. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm not turning my back on you, but I'm setting boundaries, and I expect you to respect them. If you need help, I'll be here, but on my terms. I won't keep letting you manipulate me into thinking that you're the only one who matters." There was silence on the other end, and I knew she wasn't happy, but for once, it felt like I had the power. They never did come back to my house after that. The social media posts eventually stopped as well. It wasn't easy, but I realized that standing up for myself was the most important thing I could do. No amount of guilt or manipulation could change that. I was done being their doormat, and the world didn't end because of it. And just like that, I reclaimed control over my life. My parents learned a hard lesson that day, one that I had been trying to teach them for years. Family can be complicated, but sometimes you have to draw a line in the sand and say, enough is enough. They didn't change overnight, but I did. And that's what mattered. My name is Adrian, and if there's one thing I learned growing up, it's that family doesn't always have your back. Sometimes, they'll smile to your face while handing everything you deserve to someone else. Sometimes, they'll make it clear you were never their priority. And sometimes, if you're really unlucky, they'll even laugh while they do it. I was the youngest in the family, with only one sibling, my older sister, Rachel. If you asked my parents, she was perfect. She was smart, responsible, the golden child who could do no wrong. And me? I was always just there. A background character in my own family. If she wanted something, she got it. No questions asked. And if I wanted something? Well, I needed to stop being so selfish and learn to share. It wasn't obvious at first, at least not when I was little. But as I grew up, I started noticing the pattern. Rachel got a brand new car on her 18th birthday. I got an old second-hand junker that barely ran. She went to an expensive college, fully paid for by her parents. I was told to take out student loans because they had already spent too much on Rachel's education. Every milestone in my life was treated as an inconvenience, something they had to deal with rather than celebrate. But the real betrayal? That came later. Our childhood home was everything to me. It wasn't a mansion or anything special, just a cozy two-story house with a big backyard where I used to play as a kid. It was the one place that always felt like home. My parents had owned it for decades, and they always said they planned to pass it down to us. I naively thought that meant splitting it equally between me and Rachel. I should have known better. I still remember the day they told me. I had just graduated college, scraping by on part-time jobs while looking for a real career. I was exhausted but hopeful, thinking that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally get something fair from my family. Instead, I came home to find my parents and Rachel sitting in the living room, all smiles and excitement. Great news, Adrian. My mom beamed. We've decided to give the house to Rachel. I blinked. What? Rachel has a family now, my dad said, as if that explained everything. She has a husband, a baby on the way. She needs the space. You're still young. You'll figure something out. Rachel just smirked, sitting there like a queen accepting her throne. It makes sense, doesn't it? She said. I mean, you don't even need a house. It'd be wasted on you. And then, the part that still burns in my memory, my parents laughed. Actually laughed, as if the idea of me deserving a place to live was some kind of joke. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I fought. I argued. I reminded them that I was their son too, that I had worked just as hard, that Rachel getting married didn't mean I should be thrown aside like an afterthought. But they wouldn't budge. Rachel needs it more, they kept saying. You'll understand when you're older. I left that day with nothing but a sick feeling in my stomach and the knowledge that I wasn't welcome in my own home anymore. But if they thought I'd just roll over and accept it, they were wrong. I walked out of that house feeling like the air had been knocked out of me. It was the first time in my life I truly understood what it meant to be on my own. No backup, no safety net, just me. I wanted to believe that maybe my parents would come to their senses, that they'd realize how unfair they had been. But weeks passed, and nothing changed. Rachel moved into the house like it had always belonged to her, redecorating, changing things, erasing every trace of the childhood we had shared. My parents helped her settle in, acting like they had done something noble, something right. And me? I was left scrambling. I had no savings. My part-time job barely covered my student loans, and with nowhere to go, I had to crash on a friend's couch. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd find a job, get back on my feet, and everything would be fine. But reality had other plans. Finding a stable job was harder than I expected. Every rejection email chipped away at my confidence. My friends were supportive, but I could tell I was overstaying my welcome. I can see it in the way their smiles got tighter, the way they hesitated before saying I could stay as long as I needed. I couldn't blame them. No one wants a permanent houseguest who can barely afford to chip in for rent. I applied everywhere, corporate jobs, retail, even restaurants, but nothing stuck. My parents knew I was struggling, and do you think they offered to help? Not once. When I finally caved and asked if I could stay for a little while, just until I got a steady paycheck, my mom sighed like I was being dramatic. Adrian, we talked about this, she said, her voice sickly sweet, like she was explaining something to a child. Rachel and her family need the space. You'll figure something out, you always do. Rachel, of course, had to chime in. Maybe if you stopped whining and worked harder, you wouldn't be in this mess. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palm. I am working hard. Rachel rolled her eyes. Then why are you still broke? That was the last time I asked them for anything. If they wanted to cut me out, fine. I'd do it on my own. For the next year, I bounced between cheap rentals, doing whatever I could to keep my head above water. I took jobs I hated, dealt with bosses who barely looked at me, and learned to stretch every dollar. There were nights I went to sleep hungry, mornings I woke up exhausted, but I kept going. Because I had one goal, make it out of this and never, ever need them again. And slowly, things started to change. I landed a job at a small tech startup. Low pay, long hours, but it was something. I threw myself into it, working late, taking on extra projects, learning everything I could. When promotions came up, I fought for them. When opportunities appeared, I grabbed them. While my parents were busy playing house with Rachel, I was building something real. And one day, after years of climbing, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I had my own apartment, bigger than anything I'd ever expected to afford. My bank account wasn't just stable, it was comfortable. The kind of comfortable that meant I didn't have to check my balance before making a purchase. And best of all, I had something no one could take from me, independence. I thought I'd moved on. I really did. But life has a way of bringing things full circle. Because after years of acting like I didn't exist, my parents showed up again. And this time, they were the ones with nowhere to go. It started with a phone call. A number I hadn't saved, but one I recognized instantly. My mother. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. It had been years since she last called me. The last time we spoke was a half-hearted birthday text she sent out of obligation, one I didn't even bother responding to. So why now? Curiosity won over. I picked up. Hello. For a second, there was silence. Then, a hesitant, almost nervous voice. Adrian, it's Mom. I leaned back in my chair, waiting. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. Yeah. She exhaled, as if this call was some great burden on her. How have you been? I almost laughed. How have I been? Now she cared. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of knowing just how well I was doing. Fine, I said flatly. Why are you calling? There was a pause, then a strained chuckle. Straight to the point, huh? You always were so impatient. That's when I knew she wanted something. She always pulled the motherly guilt trip when she needed a favor. I waited, letting the silence stretch until she finally cracked. Well, we've run into a bit of a situation, she admitted, her voice careful, like she didn't want to give me too many details. Your father and I, things have been hard lately. Well, we had to leave the house. I raised an eyebrow, even though she couldn't see me. Their house. They hadn't owned a house in years. They gave ours to Rachel, and last I heard, they were renting a small place nearby. What do you mean? Had to leave? I asked, my voice deceptively calm. She hesitated, and then, in a much smaller voice, she said, we were evicted. That caught my attention. My parents were not the kind of people who got evicted. They had always lived comfortably, spending money without much thought. But hearing that single word, evicted, told me exactly how bad things had gotten. I leaned forward, resting my elbow on my desk. How'd that happen? She sighed, her tone shifting into self-pity. Money problems, Adrian. We've had some bad luck. Your father's business took a hit, and, well, rent just kept going up. We fell behind, and she cut herself off, probably realizing she was revealing too much. Then, her voice brightened, as if she were just so excited to share the next part. But it's all okay, because we figured it out. We just need a place to stay for a while, just until we get back on our feet. And there it was, the real reason for the call. I let her words hang in the air for a moment before I asked, and Rachel? Silence. I knew the answer before she even spoke. Well, my mother started, her voice tight. She's going through a lot right now. The kids, you know. And her husband, he's been under a lot of stress. They don't have the space. I almost laughed. They don't have the space? In the house they stole from me. Rachel has 4 bedrooms, I pointed out. And a finished basement. Well, yes, but she scrambled for an excuse, but there was none. The truth was simple. Rachel didn't want them there. The golden child they had sacrificed everything for had turned them away. And now, after treating me like an afterthought for years, I was their only option. I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I kept my voice neutral. So let me get this straight, I said slowly. You gave away the only home we ever had. You laughed in my face when I asked for fairness. You ignored me when I was struggling. And now, after all that, you expect me to help you? My mother let out a soft, nervous chuckle. Oh, Adrian, don't be so dramatic. We're family. You know we didn't mean to hurt you. And besides, you're doing so well now. You have a big place, right? Plenty of space. Oh, so they didn't know I was successful. They must have been keeping tabs on me, even if they never reached out. I clenched my jaw, fighting the urge to just hang up right then and there. But I wasn't done yet. Where are you staying now? I asked. A motel, she admitted. But it's awful, Adrian. We can't live like this. Can't live like this. Funny. I remembered nights when I slept in my car because I couldn't afford rent. I remembered stretching a single meal across 2 days because I had nothing left in my bank account. I survived, without their help, without their pity. And now they were acting like they were the ones who had suffered. I exhaled, leaning back again. I'll think about it, I said. My mother sounded relieved. Oh, thank you, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. Just let us know when we can come by. I said I'll think about it. I interrupted. Then, without another word, I hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone, the screen still lit up from the call. My mother's voice still echoed in my head, dripping with fake sweetness. Oh, Adrian, don't be so dramatic. We're family. Family. Funny how that only mattered when they needed something. I wasn't done yet. If my parents were desperate enough to come crawling to me, that meant one thing: Rachel had shut the door in their faces. And I needed to hear that for myself. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb hesitating over her name. I hadn't spoken to Rachel in years. Not because of some dramatic falling out, but because she never needed to talk to me. She had our parents, she had the house, she had their undivided love and support. I was just an afterthought, a name on a Christmas card, if that. Still, I tapped the call button. It rang twice before she answered. Adrian, she said, her voice filled with confusion. Straight to the point. Hey, Rachel? Just got a call from Mom. There was a pause. Oh, that was all she had to say? I let the silence stretch before continuing, my tone casual. Yeah, she told me they got evicted. Said they needed a place to stay. So why aren't they with you? She sighed, the kind of exhausted sigh that people gave when they were about to justify something they knew was wrong. Adrian, it's complicated. No, it's not. My voice was sharper now. They gave you the house. They prioritized you over me for everything. But the second things go south, you're suddenly too busy to help. She groaned, like this was inconveniencing her. Look, it's not that simple. I have kids, Adrian. You wouldn't understand. Oh, don't start, I snapped. You think I don't understand responsibility? I had to build my life from nothing because Mom and Dad made sure you got everything first. And now you're just, what? Pretending they don't exist. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I can't have them here, okay? Mark isn't comfortable with it. Mark. Her husband. The guy who had zero problems taking the house when it was handed to them on a silver platter, but suddenly had an issue when it came time to return the favor. Let me guess, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. It's too much stress for him? Maybe he thinks it's not fair to disrupt your life like that. Rachel hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Wow. So now we care about fairness. Her voice turned defensive. Adrian, don't be like this. We all have our own struggles. That did it. That actually made me see red. Struggles. I repeated, my voice dangerously low. Do you remember when I was struggling, Rachel? When I had to sleep in my car because I didn't have enough for rent? When I asked Mom and Dad for help, and they laughed? Told me I didn't need a house because I didn't have a family to take care of? Silence. Yeah, I continued. But you didn't care then, did you? Because it didn't affect you. And now, when the tables have turned, you suddenly expect me to be the generous one. She let out another sigh, but this time, it wasn't exasperation. It was discomfort. Like she knew I was right but didn't want to admit it. I didn't make that decision, Adrian. Mom and Dad did. Yeah, I said coldly. And you benefited from it. There was nothing else to say. I hung up before she could respond. I sat there, my phone still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding. My parents had raised Rachel to believe the world revolved around her. They had given her my home, my security, without a second thought. And now, when they needed something, she couldn't even be bothered to return the favor. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt some sense of twisted satisfaction. But all I felt was anger. And the thing about anger? It makes you want to even the score. I stared at my phone, my fingers tightening around it as I processed everything. My parents had always put Rachel first. They had made it clear that she was the one who deserved their love, their support, their home. And now, when life had finally caught up with them, she was just as quick to abandon them as they had been to abandon me. It was almost poetic. Almost. But the anger still burned inside me. I wasn't the same person I had been all those years ago, the kid begging for scraps of affection, the broke 20-something sleeping in his car, hoping for a break. I had built something for myself. I had carved out a life through sheer willpower and hard work. And now? Now, I had the power to decide exactly how this played out. I took a deep breath and opened my messages. My mother had texted me twice while I was on the phone with Rachel. Mom texted, Adrian, we just need a place to stay for a few weeks. I know you don't have kids, so it's not like it's a big deal. We wouldn't be a burden. A burden. I closed my eyes and let out a bitter laugh. They had always seen me as someone who didn't matter, someone whose needs weren't as important as Rachel's. I had spent my childhood watching them bend over backward for her while I got the leftovers. And yet, here they were, begging me for help. I knew I could end this right now. A simple no, and I'd be free of them forever. But that wasn't enough. I needed them to feel it, to understand, truly understand, what it was like to be cast aside like they had done to me. So, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove back to my childhood home. I parked across the street and just sat there for a moment, staring at the house that had once been mine. It looked the same, yet different. Rachel had changed the color of the shutters. The porch had new furniture. There was a playset in the front yard now, probably for her kids. This house had been my home once. My memories were woven into its walls, its floors, its very foundation. But now? Now, it was just another reminder of how little I had mattered to my own family. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding, and walked up the driveway. I didn't even have to knock. Rachel had seen me through the window. She opened the door hesitantly, her expression wary. "Adrian," she said, crossing her arms. "What are you doing here?" I glanced past her, into the house. "Our house. Just wanted to see the place," I said coolly. "Been a long time." Her eyes flickered with something, maybe guilt, maybe irritation. "It's different now," she said. "It's my home." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, it is." She shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Adrian, if you came here to argue, I don't have time for this. I already told you, I can't take them in." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You know," I said, "it's funny. Mom and Dad justified giving you this house because I didn't need it, because you had a family. And yet, the second they actually need something, you're just done with them." Her jaw tightened. "You think I don't feel bad?" She snapped. "I have my own life, Adrian. I can't just drop everything for them." I tilted my head, but they expected me to. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing she had no argument. I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Just wanted to hear it from you," I said. Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless. As I got back in my car, my phone buzzed again. Another text from my mother. Mom texted, "Adrian, please. We don't have anywhere else to go." I stared at the message, my grip tightening around the phone. They had made their choice years ago, and now it was my turn. I let the phone sit in my lap, staring at the message. The same people who had laughed in my face, who had told me I didn't need a home, were now desperate for mine. The irony was almost too perfect. But I wasn't going to respond with a simple no that was too easy, too clean. They needed to feel it. They needed to understand. So I picked up my phone and dialed. My mother answered on the first ring. "Adrian." "Oh, thank God. We were starting to think you wouldn't." I cut her off. "I just talked to Rachel." Silence. Then, cautiously, "Oh, did she tell you why she can't take us in?" "She told me a lot of things." I leaned back in my seat, staring at the house, her house. "But what I really wanted to hear was whether or not she'd fight for you the way you fought for her." More silence. Then my father's voice, slightly muffled in the background. "What's he saying?" "She's not taking you in," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. "I guess you were right all along. She needed the house. She needed the family support." I let out a small laugh. "Shame she doesn't think you need the same." I could hear my mother inhale sharply. "Adrian, please, no," I said, my voice turning cold. "You don't get to please me now. Don't be like this." My father suddenly cut in. His voice, the same authoritative, dismissive tone I had heard my entire life, made my blood boil. "We're family. Families help each other." "Oh, now we're family?" I asked. "Was I your family when you laughed in my face and gave away my home? Was I family when you told me I didn't need a house? When I was struggling just to get by while you lived comfortably in the home that should have been mine?" "That was years ago," my mother said weakly. "We didn't know things would turn out this way." I clenched my jaw. "Neither did I said quietly. "I didn't know that being your son meant I was disposable. I didn't know that my whole life would be spent playing second to Rachel. And I sure as hell didn't know that one day, when you had nowhere else to go, you'd come crawling to me, expecting me to forget everything you did." "Adrian, we're sorry." My mother tried again. "But you have a big house, don't you? You have money now. You won't even notice if we stay for a while." I let out a humorless laugh. "Just like you didn't notice when I had nothing?" She faltered. "You know what's funny?" I continued. "You didn't just take my house. You took away my sense of security. You made it clear that I wasn't worth fighting for. And now, the person you did fight for won't even lift a finger for you." "Adrian, we raised you." My father snapped. "We put food on the table. We gave you, what? A roof over my head until you decided I didn't need one? A childhood full of being ignored in favor of Rachel." I scoffed. "You didn't raise me. You tolerated me." There was a long, heavy silence. Then my mother tried one last time, her voice desperate. "Please, Adrian. We have nowhere to go." I took a deep breath, closed my eyes for a moment, then exhaled. And then, I gave them the same answer they had once given me. "You don't need a house." I hung up, and this time, I wasn't the one left out in the cold. This all happened yesterday. I haven't answered any calls since, and I don't plan to. They've been blowing up my phone, alternating between guilt-tripping, fake apologies, and outright demands that I stop being petty and think about family. Even Rachel had the nerve to text me, saying I was being cruel. Cruel? Me? The same people who laughed in my face when I begged them not to take my childhood home are now calling me cruel because I won't give them a place to stay? I don't feel bad. Not even a little. But I'll admit, part of me is curious. Did I do the right thing? Should I have at least let them stay for a few days? Or is cutting them off completely the best decision? I know one thing for sure. I finally have the power in this situation, and I'm not about to hand it back. What do you think?